this is going to be a quick overview. I do a 4-hour propagation seminar for master gardeners every other year, but this is specific with native plants and starting in from seed. The biggest thing to remember about why you do all these different things is you're trying to mimic nature in how they would start if they were out in nature. And there's a, if you don't have a Prairie Moon Nursery catalog, get one, because they got a 2-page article on all the different ways that different native seeds require to get them to germinate. Some of them is nothing, hot water treatment, sitting out over the winter, moist, cold treatment is the main thing I'm going to talk about with the what we call milk jug seed starting. And some of them have to be nicked first, scarified. Some of them, I've even got some that I ordered that need 2 months of moist cold, followed by 2 months of warmth, followed by 2 more months of moist cold, and then you can plant them. That
the good old double dormancy.
Right.
Yep.
And
Wow.
yeah, and it was something, I don't remember what it is, but it's something I really wanted, so I'm doing it. The easiest way to start native seeds is to plant them out in the ground or in a pot. I put most of mine in pots so the bunny rabbits don't eat them when they come up, or a raised bed. But to do that as soon as it gets cold, after the first frost, and once the temperature's consistently cold, just plant them out there and they'll come up when it gets warm enough. Now you got to be patient, because like milkweeds, it may be May before they emerge, because the ground's got to be really pretty warm before they'll do that. But that's by far the easiest way. And what we're doing here is trying to cheat nature and get ahead of it. Lots of ways to do it, and there's some different things. We call it milk jug, and Kay has about 500 blue stem goldenrods in here. I don't use milk jugs anymore, even though we call it milk jug. About 2 years ago, I had one of these full of common milkweeds, and it was full of them. And I opened it up and put it in the UV greenhouse, and the next day they were all dead. So I use smaller ones, and you still get more than enough. And you'll be able to see here. This has got. And this is one actually only requires 10 days of cold treatment, and it's lead plant, which is a real pretty flower. I've never grown it before, but there's quite a few of them in here. Here's purple coneflower, which the book says needs to be soaked for 24 hours in water before you plant it, but I didn't, and there's
Yeah, really high humidity.
bunches of them in there. Yeah, and humidity is critical to new plants. I lose more plants in the first transplant than any other way put together. And what I've learned to do is after I put them into smaller pots or individual pots or whatever, you better have a plastic hood to put over them, or even a clear plastic bag or something for a few days, and then gradually expose them to regular humidity, because otherwise they won't take it. So the jugs, here's an example of a real handy one. Doesn't cost us anything, and all I do is just sprinkle the seeds in there. In fact, I had some stiff goldenrod I was going to put in here, but I don't see it. That's all right. But then what you do is you wrap some tape around it. And furnace tape like that is really hard to get off. I got this kind of tape that's metal. It tears real easy. And I just prefer using this, and one big roll will last you for a decade. You just put it all, wherever you cut it to plant the seeds, then you just wrap it around, and that keeps it closed, just like
You
that.
don't cut it all the way off, do you?
No.
You just, so yes, you
Yeah.
can
Hinge.
flip it over.
Well, no, you don't have to flip it over after you put the seeds in there. Oh, here's those.
No, she said, don't cut it all the way off, Greg, just leave a hinge.
Right.
So Greg, I was reading an article the other day, and this woman was just bound and determined to say that there's a difference between the translucency, like you have some clear ones and you have the traditional milk jug. Have you found that there's a difference in success rate if you're putting something in clear plastic?
No, you might think it would be, but they're not.
Okay.
And mainly because you're not going to grow them to adulthood in here. All right. Main thing here is heat and humidity. That's the main purpose of the jugs. And after a while, you know, you're going to take the top part off anyway and let them get more light. Furnace rooms are a real good place to put them. Anywhere that gets good heat, good warmth is going to be okay. If it's, you know, after you're trying to get them to sprout, yeah, I put them outside, you know, after I plant them in the fall, you know, I put them outside for whatever it is. And it's different. This lead plant, 10 days is all it took to stratify. But there are a lot of, most of them, probably the most common is 30 days, milkweeds. Put them out there for 30 days and then bring them in the heat and they will sprout, yeah.
Sure, you're gonna cover this, but what's the medium you're planting them in?
Potting mix, mostly, just, you know, any good sterile potting mix, but that's a good segue. I have a new favorite seed starting medium. It's called Coconut Coir. And it's not as wet as peat moss. It's ground up coconut hulls. And you want to pre-wet it. And it holds the moisture good, but it also has some drainage. And I usually put maybe an inch of that, you know, and the top part of this would be, you know, an inch or so of that. And like I say, it's best if it's pre-wet, but, you know, you can soak it
Where
and
do
get
you
it
get
wet
it
too.
at? Coconut?
Lowe's carries it. I don't know about the other, I know Lowe's has it.
It's better for the environment than harvesting peat.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so that's a real plus too. So all kinds of jug. I do quite a few things with little itty bitty seeds like cardinal flower and blue lobelia and stuff. I cut one of these in half. And be grateful, honey. One of our master gardeners sells those. Yeah.
So transitioning, you have seedlings
Mhm.
that are actually in pretty crowded conditions inside a small
Right.
container. What's your timing? You know, how long do you allow them to stay in there before you transplant?
Yeah, and that's another challenging part. I really want them to have a pretty good set of roots on them, and maybe have at least 2, maybe even 4 sets of true leaves. You know, the first leaves you see aren't the true leaves. Then the next 2 sets of leaves are the true leaves, and they really need to be at least that size before you even think about transplanting them.
Have you had any problems with fungal problems growing in those crowded, damp conditions, or does the enclosed container?
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, so I know coconut coir does have some antifungal properties as
Mhm.
well, so I can see why it would be a great
Yeah.
seed starting medium, but yeah, that's one of the things. So you aren't you're leaving those lids cracked and you're just.
No, well, no, you know, actually.
take those off?
These I've already taken in.
Okay.
I put them outside with the lids off.
With the
And
lids
let
on.
rain water them,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And check them once in a while, just to make sure they don't dry out. But, you know, this winter, that's not been a problem. We've had pretty consistent rain. Yeah, you put that off. But I put the lids back on when I want them to germinate, just to keep the humidity up.
Humidity up.
Yeah.
And then after they germinate, do you take those lids back off, or do you leave it pretty humid?
I leave them on for a while. When they start getting a little bit bigger, I'll start, just a minute. You know, I'll start taking it off as, you know, before I start taking the whole part off, or at least opening it for part of the day and stuff, yeah.
Okay.
So to tag on to that, you're bringing them back in the house?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, they need the
I
heat.
never brought mine back in.
They need, well, see, like I say, we want to have some of these ready for our June sale.
Well, yeah,
A lot of them, honestly, probably won't be till September.
Speeds it up a little bit.
Right.
Same thing.
Now,
Yeah, and like I also plant some outside in,
Okay.
like I said, in pots or raised beds, but, you know, those are just gonna be coming up in May.
Can you do larger plants like shrubs or trees? in that-
Sure.
that mechanism
Yeah,
thing, like-
and I do cuttings like this too. And cuttings is another really, really good way to grow a lot of a lot of native plants. And some of them, like button bush, are good to take cuttings, like in January or February, I think. Yeah,
Do you have more success on like a north-facing wall versus a east or south facing because of the sun hitting it and warming and cooling and then warming and cooling?
well, like I say, I don't worry too much about that, although my backyard is north facing, so. I haven't tried it. What you're saying is if they got too much sun, it might warm them up and encourage them to sprout.
And it dries them out quicker too.
Yeah.
If it's against your
Yeah.
house on the south
So
side.
that probably even in the shade is a good idea, as long as they can still get some rainwater in them and stuff. But yeah, I probably want to avoid direct sun
Yeah.
when you're stratifying them.
so
That's a
tag
good
on to
point.
him, do you then pot up like to a 4-inch? Are you potting each
It-
of those up into a 4-inch? or
It
what do you-
depends a lot on what kind of plant it is and what kind of size it's going to get to. A lot of times, like with a lot of plants we're growing for master gardeners right now, we'll put a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch of cuttings or a whole bunch of seeds in one big pot, and then in March we'll transplant them into individual, usually 4-inch pots.
So you mean you take them out of that and then you pot them in a bigger
Right.
pot?
Yeah.
Get those roots in,
Mhm.
I
Yep.
guess, and group a bunch together just
Mhm.
for expediency's sake, I guess.
Right.
And then when they get bigger, you put them in
And then
their own pot.
they're gonna be stronger too.
Yeah.
If you let them grow, you know, in other words, plant clumps in the
Yeah.
4-inch pots or in the.
Yeah.
Because I always seem to lose a couple of them. So if you got 4 or
Right.
5 in one little clump, you lose 2, you still got 3 good ones.
Right.
So, you know,
Yeah.
it takes forever in the
It's
space
still a
to
good
put each
start.
individual, yeah.
One of the biggest problems I've found in starting seedlings is that, especially single seedlings in a large pot, is overwatering and too much moisture for
Yes.
the amount of plant that's there. So usually seeds are fairly inexpensive, so if you grow a ton and plant multiples in a pot like that, they fill out the pot quicker and that overwatering problem gets addressed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They'll transpire a lot quicker.
Yep.
One of the things really important when you're putting them outside wet is drainage. You always want to make sure, you know, to do a little something like this. And I usually put 3 or 4 holes in each one. The bigger pots, I definitely put at least 4 holes in it. So if it does rain, it's not going to get over soaked. It's going to run out the bottom. Probably the most crucial stage is when you harden them off. Like I was saying, you really have to you got to be patient and do it, you know, for maybe an hour or 2 the first day, where you cut through the tape or you peel it off and you just open the lid, and then after a couple hours you put it back, and you each day gradually do it for longer and longer till they're looking pretty strong and hardy, and then you can take it off, and again, like I say, I wait till they get to a decent size before I transplant them. And it's really hard to not plant too many seeds, especially with the little itty bitty seeds. If any of you have seen the seeds for cardinal flower, blue lobelia, they're like begonia seeds. They're like dust. And begonias is something I've been growing for over 40 years, so it can be challenging. The bigger the seeds, I think probably easier to transplant, but the harder it is to get them to sprout. And those are especially ones that are going to maybe need a nick or need to be pre-soaked for 24 hours before you plant them. And that'll really help if you study each plant. And I've been trying to find an online source that would tell all of them, you know, for everything, and I've not been successful. Prairie Moon has all the more common ones and what kind of conditions to start them, but you can probably Google it.
Have you been out to Tom Clothier's database?
Clothier, I just discovered that
database?
day before yesterday. That is crazy awesome. That guy is
It's
brilliant.
amazing.
Yeah.
I'll send it
He's
to
got
Megan.
everything.
Anyway, what he's done is he's taken annuals, perennials, grasses. And like I'm saying, it is an old, like WordPress database. And they're alphabetical by their Latin name.
Yes.
And then it's very basic. He'll tell you like the double, like you're talking about the double stratification,
Yeah.
if it's required. Now, like there are some areas that it's lacking, but he'll tell you, 40 days at this temperature, do not cover.
So sell seeds.
No, this man will put this together, it's great. Oh, you got it, right there. And so like, click on one, you click on the thumb, go up, like, and click on green.
So it's just, you're saying it's
See?
references for. if
See
you want-
It's just
Look at it.
Yeah, so it's-
Okay.
It's an
Cool.
instruction for each.
Genus and
Yeah.
species you can
She's got it
have.
on the screen, it's just a
That's what I've
Latin
been
name.
looking for.
Yeah.
Perfect. I see.
That's
Yeah.
why we have this group.
And see, that's a good example of the value of belonging to a group like this, is we share information. And that's really good. One other thing I did want to demonstrate is for little bitty seeds, and I have in here some cardinal flower that is already stratified. It's been on the stem outside till yesterday. And it's really good. If you have too much plant matter in with your seeds, it could get fungus and really kill all your seeds. So you want to get the seeds out. And I just get a screen like this. This is a grease splatter screen that I commandeered.
Genius.
And I just kind
That's
of...
not Susie's grease splatter screen, is it?
Yeah. And you can see, you can come by and see, here's
The seed.
the cardinal flower seeds. They're very little, so if anybody wants some stratified seeds, we'll pour these in an envelope. And I've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 stems like this that you can do yourself. And go ahead and plant them in a jug and get them going. They don't have to be stratified, they already are. Yeah.
So what have you found is the most efficient way, where you were talking about one that needs cold stratification, heat, cold, what type of vessel are you using to be able to efficiently deal with that seed month after month after month? Jeff.
Yeah. What we got here, they're free.
Yeah, I'll say something. When I do a lot of them that takes forever and I don't want to
Yes.
mess with the jugs, I use a cold frame that has a plastic top and I put a thermometer in there. I plant them in the fall, leave that lid open, then I close it early spring and they'll come up quicker. And if you have to do them twice, you can still leave them in that cold frame. And it's like you build a wooden frame and put hinges on the back. Sorry, and it has a hinge on it.
Put an old window
Yeah, and you can do a
over it.
window, a storm door, a shower door,
I
anything.
have one and I put some
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
in there, but then I kept thinking, yeah, but if it warms up in the winter.
You raise the lid up. What I do is go out there as
I
it
should
warms
just
up and I look at my
heat it up.
thermometer, I stick a brick in there. It gives me just enough to take it out, take the heat out. And then I had one that was so heavy, I put a pulley on the back and all I had to do was just pull down on it, pulls that shower door up. You leave it open all summer, it gets rain and everything, and then you dig out what you want to plant. But if you take something that has to have a rider with it, I borrowed some grasses from Paul one year because a plant had to have a certain grass seed to go with it to make it germinate. Well, then if you have something that you don't need to plant for 2 years, it may take 2 years for something to come up re-cold, come up again. I leave it in there, leave it open. The next winter I close it down so it's still in there, and then just keep doing that process till you get your seed up and then plant it. So that, to me, that was easier than trying to do 50 million
So
jugs, you know, you had to water and bring
Sure,
in.
these are the
No, I'm
old,
good.
the habitat restore
Yeah,
place
yeah.
for next to nothing.
And another way, you can stratify in place outdoors like this, or you can use a refrigerator. You know,
And I'm doing that with some right
yeah,
now.
so
Yeah.
that's a good way to stratify.
You want to
just
put them in a
Ziploc
baggie with
bags.
the paper towel, and they need to be moistened, you know.
Yeah.
And they almost all need to be moistened and cold.
So that'd be like a moist stratification.
Right.
If you have
And so usually you'll take that paper towel, you don't want a ton of water in it, you want it minimally moistened.
Right, yeah, just moist.
Or you can use minimally moistened potting mix if you have a lot of seeds that you
Right.
want to mix. And then you could, after the datum, set a note on your calendar to go back and look, and then pull those out, and then they're ready to go. So pawpaw trees like 90-day stratification. So your pawpaw seeds, put them in your refrigerator for 90 days, and they're ready to go.
Yep. So, other questions or other things you want to share that you've had with?
This is
Start
really
things
inspiring.
easy.
I'm going to take some seeds today, and I know I have one of these things in my garage right now, ready to go, and I'm going to start some seeds this weekend. So thanks a lot for
Yeah.
presenting.
Yeah.
I had a question about that. Like on those 2 Coke bottles there, you say you divide those and put them in pots.
Mm-hmm.
So take that larger one there, how many pots would you end up putting that in? If you were going to try
this
to
one?
salvage all those, if you were to try to get the.
Yeah.
And on these pots, you're talking about
You don't have no pots.
like
Yeah, I
paper
don't have
pots,
enough pots
plastic
around.
pots, or what?
Plastic mostly, yeah.
Yeah. So-
And they can be,
Or
you
3,
know,
4-inch pot.
clean. Yeah, you want them sterile.
Yeah.
If they got old dirt in them or something, you know, you want to clean
So how
them.
many
Just soap and
pots
water.
would you try to get out of that
Oh,
larger bottle?
probably,
Maybe
there are
20.
not all that many in here. There's probably
Yeah.
less than 100.
You're counting on a few
Uh,
casualties, I assume.
You know, probably half a dozen or so,
Half dozen.
4.5-inch pots, yeah. You know, and clumps about like that.
If you're working with a big clump of seedlings, you want to work in the shade, usually, and you want to, carefully, you can use water or carefully tease those out. And if they do get larger, you could go to 1 plant per pot because the larger you let the seedling get, the lower the mortality will be. The
Right.
smallest seedlings are the ones that are really delicate. So if they're a little bit larger,
Yeah.
you can go with 1 plant per pot. If they're a little smaller, you could tease out 3 or 4 plants per pot, and then use a dibble is the name, horticulturally, but a pencil or a dowel or something to poke a hole in, and then you can use a bamboo stake or a toothpick on smaller things or something to help
Cocktail forks work.
cocktail forks to push the roots down into that hole that you've opened up. So you're really trying to set that seedling down into the soil versus like pushing it, or you're kind of just poking a hole, dropping those roots down in there. You might have to thread them down with something and then mist that container with water. Don't like flood it, because you just want to kind of settle that thing in there gently. Keep the humidity up for a few days, like
Yes.
Greg said.
Yes.
Keep it really humid for a few days and then start to back that down. Seedlings always in the shade when they're delicate stages of transplant. When you're transplant in the shade and then harden those plants out and get them back to fuller light levels.
Something else really important, once you do bring them inside, is good light. Either a greenhouse, I've replaced almost all my fluorescent lights with LEDs, and they work great for getting stuff even into blooming and everything. And you want it pretty close, like with a pot like this where they're here, my LED is gonna be close as I can get it, because they're
Like
not
an
hot,
LED
like
shop
fluorescents
light,
are anyway.
Like a shop light, not
Yeah,
a special.
right, yeah, they're strips, the LEDs are strips, like $14.95 at Menards.
And at what point do you feed? And what do you feed with? like
Oh,
live fish?
you know,
or something?
I'm very consistent with almost everything I have. I use a dropper full of, liquid fertilizer in a gallon and you know, or in a milk, you know, in a, you know, and I use that most of the time.
Usually it's
don't
about
wanna-
a 1/4%
You don't want to
start
fertilize
out.
them now, but after I start growing them, the liquid fertilizer.
So after they establish in their transplanted plant pot, they,
Yeah, because that'll help the roots and everything grow. You don't want to put too much, you'll burn them up, but just real light and diluted, you know, Miracle Grow or
And a lot
something.
of times, if you put them back, if you pot them up, my thing was, you'd kill them, because you water too much, like Paul was saying, don't sprinkle too much. I put them back in the starter trays, and you can line up about, if they're 4-inch pots, you can get 8 to 10. If they're 3-inch pots, you can get about 15 to 18. They have little grooves in the bottom. If you water from the bottom, let them suck it up. That way, you're not drowning them, you're not mashing your soil, packing it down in your pots. And they do a lot better. I had better results doing it that way.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of seeds that aren't native, that are very fine and little, and they're in containers like this or this, and I'm actually watering them from the bottom.
And I usually take a mister. If they're real fine, I just mist them when it says mash them in. I always mist them in just a little bit. That's just enough soil to get on there to get them down into contact. And if they're still small, I still mist them instead of try to water them, because you disperse too much soil stuff out through there. It's a lot easier.
So, other questions? This has been great. I love everybody else sharing.
One more. So I've come to the native plant sale that you do, and it seems like to me that every plant there is something that someone has grown or harvested from their garden, whereas when you go to the master gardener, you know, a lot of those are transplants they bought from a broker. So is everything that we're talking about selling in June, you don't buy it from a broker and resell? Okay. I didn't think so, but I...
I'll start from seed.
Yeah,
One
they're
big-
either they're dug or started from
Right.
seed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only ones that I think we've ever purchased were from Knox County's native plant sales that they
Right.
do. But they're
They
all.
started them from
Right,
seed.
they started from seed.
From seed, okay.
And they grow theirs from seed that they collect in that area, so they're sort of like
Mhm.
micro.
And then I do have a second question. So I'm familiar with the state website, and like, you know, there's a PDF you can download with suggested native plants, and then they've got the one that I was on today that shows all the pictures. Do we like have more that we recommend here in Southwest Indiana, and is that somewhere available, or is that just something that you share if you're a member? How does that work?
So a few years ago, Ann Bush, she put together that landscaping
Like
PDF.
4 pages.
Yes, it's
Yes.
4 pages, and I had every intention of bringing them with me today, but I could not find the file, and all of my printed copies were in Mount Vernon, and I wasn't driving to Mount Vernon to get them. So, but I think that's a great list, and she has it broken down into different types and their heights and those types of things. It's a great starting guide for sure.
Is it
Um,
different than the
yes.
state list?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
going
yeah,
to
she
be,
did this herself.
Right.
It's gonna be more
And
our
it's
microclimate.
specifically our Southwest Indiana native plants that behave themselves in landscaping, which was one of the things that we were talking about.
So,